Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another game theory video, community sort of discussion video. Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks, Super Chat, PayPal, only friends. If you want to see me bust, you can go there. Support the cause. Okay. So I guess I've been missing out. I guess I've been getting recommended all these videos talking about throw loops because they were changed, I guess, in Street Fighter 6. Like you gain back drive meter and super, I guess, for attacking a throw now, right? And so this kind of stuff has been getting recommended to me. And I watched one of these videos, and one of the videos I looked at was why throw loops were different in older games. But, when I think about this throw loop stuff in general, and this video talks about how in old school games, you had more throw invincibility when you would wake up and everything like that. This brings me to 2 points that I always talk about in always quotation marks. A lot of videos I talk about, right? How the homogenization of games is killing them. Quotation marks, killing them, right? Of course, some people still play, but right. I talked about when Street Fighter 6 came out that characters kind of were going to have the same idea, even though these characters were going to be seemingly so different if you just look at them at face value. Every character kind of depends on the meter to do stuff. And I'm like, oh shit, it's going to just be Slimer. Drive us this, drive us this. I'm like, oh my God. Of course, throws. Throws another thing, right? It's not strange to think that people would complain about throws because throws are a homogenized meta, you could say, right? Where if we were to compare it to an old school game, right? I've said this before. Sometimes people use terms that are kind of disingenuous to compare it to an old school game. Because when you say, and again, I've used the example of footsies. When people say footsies nowadays, footsies does not mean the same thing as it did back when Street Fighter 2 sort of days, right? Footsies is not the same thing, right? So when you say throw loops are in Street Fighter 2 sort of games, right? But we didn't think of them in the same way, right? When you think of a quotation marks throw loop or something in Street Fighter 2, it's not throwing the guy right when they get up, right? You think of throw loops, you might think of, and to clear this out of the way, I'm not advocating for, say, T-Hawk or E-Honda, stored Ochio throw, stored Tomahawk Buster throw, Cyclone Buster, whatever that move is called, right? I'm not advocating for that, even though I advocate for old school games quite often on my channel, right? That kind of thing has no place in a fighting game. Those two things have no place in a fighting game, but they are a throw loop, right? But besides that, generally speaking, when you think of, say, a throw loop or what we might call a tick throw or a cheap throw, is basically tap, throw, tap, throw, tap, throw. That would be your throw loop in Street Fighter 2. But generally, you would think of that with a character that has a hold throw, right? A mash on throw. Boom, 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 mash on the throw. The guy pops up, tick throw over and over and over again and loop it, right? That might be an example of a throw loop in an old school game. Or I guess if it was before, Championship Edition, when you didn't even have reversals, period. It really was just like, they used to call it cheap throw, right? Because you tick throw, tick throw, tick throw, tick throw, tap throw, right? And not that you can't do that in Super Turbo, but of course there's at least reversals, you could say, right? In Super Turbo. But, an interesting thing to compare that again, with the mindset of homogenization, right, is a difference is Street Fighter 6, the throw loop is a homogenized sort of thought in your head, right? Every character, quotation marks, can do it, right? Quotation marks, right? But when you think of throws in old school games, guess what? Throw loops aren't a one size, every character can do the same thing. It's not a mindset for every character to go for a throw loop because not every character can even do it, right? And an interesting thing you could think about, say, because people hate on old school games, guess what? Who are some of the best characters in the game? When you think of Vega, do you think Vega is a character that is throw looping you? No. Do you think Sagat is a character that is throw looping you? No. Now, some of the better characters, you might say Dalsum does have noogie throw. He could go for a little bit of a throw loop thing here. Balrog headbutt. He could go for a bit of a throw loop there. But guess what? What about Ken? Is Ken a top tier character? Ken can throw loop, knee bash loop, you could say, right? From a certain perspective, at least. Blanca could bite or try to go for some, well, maybe not as good as Ken, right? But, so the idea that there are throw loops in old school games, but guess what? It's not quotation marks overpowering because it's specific. And even if the character has a throw loop, it's not the main discussion of the game because it's individualized, right? Not like an actual meta of Street Fighter 6 where you think of Street Fighter 6 as, even though these characters are so seemingly different, they all share a sort of quotation marks, they all have a similar win condition, right? Whereas Street Fighter 2, again, using the things like, some characters have throw loops. Guess what? They might not even be quotation marks good, right? Again, I'm not advocating for T-Hawk or E-Honda because T-Hawk or E-Honda's throw loop, that has no place in any fighting game, right? The Sword Ocho. But even then, E-Honda does have versus some characters, depending on the throw you do, you can try to, go for, tick throw kind of stuff. And that can be kind of obnoxious versus, say, charge characters that you can get an actual kind of corner cross up off it or something like that. But again, just what I talk about so often, games not being homogenized and this balance in the chaos, every character having a different win condition. And even thinking about throws the extra layer to old school games that is interesting. When you think about that, throws actually being your normal, and I've made videos about this before. Not that I hate throws being jab and short at the same time, because even when I think back to randomly playing Street Fighter 2, I think it's kind of fun teching a throw with little punch and little kick at the same time. It kind of feels good. I know feel is an ambiguous term, but it doesn't feel bad to do that. But why I've advocated for normals actually being throws is because then you get into random sort of, a deeper layer of what that could mean. And I've showed examples of, say it's Super Turbo, say it's Ryu versus Ryu, right? Normally you might think that you would do punch throw with Ryu, right? But imagine it's Ryu versus Ryu, right? So if I try to throw you forward, right, with a forward throw, and Ryu, well, maybe he doesn't want to risk a dragon punch, let's say, to get out of the tick throw. I can hurricane kick, right? And if it's versus Super Turbo Ryu, Ryu is going to do his overhead or his rush fierce, right? And hurricane kick is going to beat that, right? So that might be a situation where I might actually want to throw with my kick then, because my kick will beat the hurricane kick. Then we go another layer. Well, what if it's old Ryu? Well, if it's old Ryu, then maybe my stand fierce actually has enough active frames that I can still hit Ryu if he tries to reversal out of a tick throw with a hurricane kick, right? There's little bits of like meta there that I think makes normals also being your throw kind of interesting when you get into those character specific matchups that is kind of lost. Again, even though I think that throws being two buttons actually does feel kind of good, I think it loses a little bit of those extra layers that old school games have. And then you even have the examples of, you're able to have more different throws. Like remember, so say Ken has punch throw, Ken has hell wheel throw, and Ken has knee bash throw, right? Well, knee bash throw has to be the medium kick, right? So he has, a different normal, right? Different normals do different things, right? Different proximity of this throw has this much range versus this throw has this much range. Hold throws, guess what? Hold throws, you can't tech. But hold throws also, they can only go forward. So I can't hold throw the guy and try to get him. If I'm cornered, I can't do a mash throw and try to throw them to the other side. I can only go forward when I do that. That's another interesting thing I think about old school games and how they work. Also, you think about Super Turbo. Think about the idea that throws, when you tech a throw and you take damage, right? You actually take the full life of the throw, but then it goes back. That's just because of how the game works. So there's certain situations where you might be like, well, you know, normally I would want to do a mash on throw because it does more damage if I mash it. But in a situation where maybe the guy might be already ready to mash or something like that, or the guy is almost dead, it might be better to go for the punch throw, or well, whatever throw is your big throw, right? Instead of the mash throw, because then even if the guy does tech it, well, they take full damage, right? So there's weird little things that you can kind of like, there's like a different sort of thought process. Like it goes deeper, which I think is, again, I know some people don't like one button throws, but I don't think it's actually clear cut that just two button throws are so much better than one button throws, because you lose some of that extra layer, some of that extra mind game, some of those character specific matchups of what normal might I get versus this character, right? And I think that's something interesting, right? So again, talking about the homogenization of games and throw loops. So again, throw loops are throw loops in Super Turbo, but it's not the same thing, right? So it's slightly disingenuous. And even when it is there, you think it actually just shows off the specialness of old school games. It's not every character, quotation marks, has the same meta. Anyway, keeping the channel active. Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, so the comment, share, support the channel if you can. Appreciate it. Thanks. The end.